Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series, where I take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. With this video, I'll be reviewing the DM's Guild Monster Compendium Creature Feature Quarterly Volume 1, designed by Jeremy Hart for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. Shout out to my platinum patrons Andrew, Brian, and Richard, and gold patrons RPG Papercrafts and Charming Grenade. Thank you all so much for your support. Flip on over to me. So I don't have a lot of nostalgia or love for the e-zine style, but I do respect it, and I can enjoy it too. Good timing with the phone call. Jeez. This is definitely done in that style. This is it's purely the black and white. Kind of looks like that photocopied. Has that classic font, even that the e-zines have. As I said, I'm not particularly into it, but I think it works pretty well here because these are monsters that are very demonic and otherworldly and alien and nasty. You can see this lovely person on the cover, and I think it works really well, and the art is very good too. This is like the kind that you'd see, not necessarily like a middle schooler's notebook, but like an actual like professional arts supply portfolio. You'd be flipping through these pages and you see, like, it's like concept art for like a video game or something. So I really do dig that style, even though I'm not particularly into the actual like e-zine format. That said, I do like the fact that it's laid out landscape-wise. It helps me make a banner image. By the way, for DM's Guild, if you're a creator watching this, having a banner available is super awesome for the purposes of making a video. Usually I have to crop the cover, and it just doesn't look too great. But having some kind of a banner-sized image for your product is definitely great. So what this one includes is 13 monsters, and that's it. There's no intro. There's no lead-in information about what these monsters are, what the theme is, or anything like that. It's just a collection of monsters. Now, after reading it, I can pick up on a general theme, which is, as I mentioned, very much this demonic, just nasty, otherworldly, lots of teeth, concept of monsters that kind of ties it together. But otherwise, it's not really designed to fit necessarily any one theme. Challenge-wise, it's about a solid tier 2. So you'll find a lot of like CR 7s and 8s and 9s, that kind of a range. Like, I guess that'd be ladder T2. There's one that's like a 15 or 16 that's really high up there. And then there's maybe one or two that are kind of lower level. But otherwise, these are definitely going to be slightly higher level, but not necessarily like just insanely strong. But I have a point on that later as we go through. And it's hard to make a judgment pass on the balance without, playtesting it yourself. And obviously playtesting tabletop content is extremely difficult and time-consuming for a lot of reasons. So all I can look at is a basis of comparison to like what's already been published, what's in the monster manual, that kind of thing. And some of these creatures seem incredibly strong and powerful for what their CR levels are. And I realize that's something, and maybe that's just a complaint about Wizards of the Coast, is that their monsters are maybe just a little bit erring on the easy side. Because when I see like Kobold Press do a lot of their monster stuff, a lot of it is monsters just generally stronger at the CR level. Like, there's a lot more hit points, so monsters stick around a lot longer, and maybe just other companies and people just they want combat to last longer, so they just kind of create these artificially larger stats. But here, oh my goodness, some of the damage is outrageous. So it's listed in alphabetical order. I'm not necessarily going to go through every single one of them. I do have it zoomed out a little bit so that we can fit them all on a page, because since it's using that kind of landscape format, it won't really fit very well for scrolling purposes on my normal 2-page scroll. But I want to talk about what I really like that this compendium does, and it organizes the description really well. So you can see on all of these creatures, our description page, which you get a full page for each one, is divided between the actual description, the lore, the ecology, and then seeds. And the descriptions are all written almost in a way that is like a DM literally describing that creature to a player. Like, it's basically written in that voice, which is really fascinating. Like the creature's mouth is wide and abundant with menacing fangs. The canine teeth curve outwards like scimitars. The teeth seem to have an oily sheen to them. Like, that's all very descriptive and evocative language, as if you were a DM, like telling that to the players. And all of the description, and it's just specifically the descriptions, are written that way, which I think is pretty effective. The lore goes into some background information about where these creatures came from, what their deal is. Ecology goes into like what they eat, where they're found, how they could breed, perhaps. And then the seeds are basically story hooks that you could use for these specific creatures, which is really, really fascinating. I don't think I've ever seen that before in any kind of monster compendium, is just a list of optional like story hooks about, hey, how would you use this creature in your campaign? Like, what would be based on this creature's like habitat and personality and intelligence level, like what would they be doing? So like the arboreal stalker, a human settlement has been chopping away some trees and encroaching on their territory, and so these creatures are fighting back against that. For the Cerebran Warlock, which is this humanoid Cerberus spellcaster, it's actually not immediately hostile to the players, which is an important note that it makes, like in its lore and everything. It's a demon, a devil, that hunts specific people. So, if the players aren't one of those specific people, then it doesn't really have a beef with the players. Instead, it'll try to work with them and try to figure out information. A lot of the story hooks are about, you find this monstrous creature like searching in a monk's quarters, and then if you're assuming you're not outwardly hostile to this horrifying creature, then it will explain that it is hunting this monk that's like escaped from hell. So that's really interesting, especially with the ones that aren't just, generic brute monsters that attack you on sight. Having those story hooks is a really effective method of giving the DM more ideas of how to use this creature and what are the most effective ways to use this creature. I would have liked to see maybe even for an additional level like tactics on how to run, because something I'm really impressed with in a lot of adventures are whenever they have some particularly big fights up and the author writes like specifically how does this dragon approach this fight, and this is how you effectively use this monster. As a DM, that's really good useful information for me, and that would have been nice here in terms of how do they specifically use it. Now, some of that is mentioned. You just have to read, in their ecology or their lore, and how their different things work. Like, for example, there was this weird like ropey tendril lich thing. I mean, just skip past a bunch. Where are you? Tatter Demelon Lich. And it is basically all based around the magic jar spell, which lets you put your soul in a jar, and then from there you can possess others. And this creature is basically just built around that spell. It is a 6th level spellcaster that just, its 6th level spell is magic jar, and that's its whole thing, is it can put itself into these items and then use that item to possess others. And one of its story seeds is like, a Tatterdemon Lich joins the party, and it could be a powerful ally, but eventually turn on you because it's going insane. Like, that's an insane story hook that I never would have even thought of. It's really effective, and I like that a lot. I like it when there are creatures that have very specific, unique traits about them that make them interesting. When it fails is when it's just the creatures aren't, particularly interesting. So that arboreal stalker is actually one of the least interesting creatures on here, because it's just a big brute that can kind of, it's good at surprising enemies. And it's a CR5, but still, I feel like, at this point, if you're really making new creatures, they really have to be something special, because the monster manual covers damn near everything, and a lot of monsters you can make are just based on taking traits from that. And the weakest creatures on here is literally just that. It's ones that you could clearly look at the monster manual and just pull bits and pieces from and make your own creature from there. When it gets interesting is when it does stuff like that Lich, where it uses, it's based around the magic jar spell, or this Blade Wrath, which is, it's just a wraith, I guess I should say. It's just a wraith, slightly scaled up. It's a CR6, but this blade, and this is all listed in the lore, is actually a magic item that players can gain a hold of, and I wish it was an actual separate stat block that kind of goes beyond the scope of what this is, because there's not magic items here, but it basically says that it's a cursed item and there are rules for it. That requires a DC 12 Charisma saving throw. If failed, the wielder is charmed by the blade for 1d12 hours. And then if they kill and they get their life, they get the life draining ability, which I guess the stat is there in the action right there. Whenever it does damage, they gain the Blade Wraith regains hit points equal to the amount as it reduces the hit points of the enemy. And then if you keep on doing that to where you, what does it say? When the DC check reaches 20, the character then transforms into a Blade Wraith. So you can just become this monster by using this sword. And that's a neat concept that goes above and beyond what a lot of monsters are, which is just taking different traits from the monster manual and creating your own thing with maybe a few little quirks. But this one actually has this magic sword that has its own component about it, which is interesting. So the Devourer, looks fucking crazy cool. The lore is actually really neat. It's about this race of giants that all had their heads chopped off, but through whatever shenanigans, their neck just grew up, and this grew fucking mouth and teeth, which is messed up. Mechanics-wise, it's like a miniature Tarrasque. It has the swallow ability, so it has this huge attack. It's a plus 12 to hit for 6d8 plus 8 damage. It is a CR12 creature. And it can swallow creatures whole. There are actually 2 creatures in here that can swallow them whole. But otherwise, there's not much going on with that particular creature. The Fallen Celestial is CR16. This is a massive, just a classic Fallen Demon creature. Doesn't have a whole lot going on about it, and I'm not sure how well you'd be able to include a fucking fallen angel in there. But again, the seeds are there. It's, a single one has been terrorizing a village, or a group are attempting to destroy a kingdom. Obviously this is a high level creature, so these are pretty high stakes threats. This was the other one that could swallow whole, the Lurking Glutton, which I like this thing that it's completely silent. It's this really weird alien creature and it's mentioned in the lore that its stomach is essentially a bag of holding. You go into an extra dimension when you go in there and you start suffocating and taking damage every round, which is very cool. I like that. It creates just a little unique thing about this creature. This guy is fucking crazy looking, the Manted Stitch Golem. And he's got a really neat ability, kind of like the Boulé, where he does the Deadly Pounce. But because he's got the 4 swords, he can obviously hit everybody in the square, and then they take piercing damage and get knocked prone whenever he does his jump attack. And he can do 3 attacks with his scythes. And what does he have, 6 here? It's an insect golem with blades, which is a very neat concept. By the way, you can see on every page here, size comparison. That's a really, really neat thing to have also. Normally you have to infer based on, it says large, it says huge, it says small, so you kind of know what that is. But having this visualization right here, and in the description will sometimes say it's twice the height of a man, you're like, okay. But literally when you be able to visualize it, and that helps for me a lot, I can see here, okay, this, it's a small imp, or it's a large undead. Oh, that is, okay, now I see what twice the size means. The actual blade is even taller. That's crazy looking. And that's a really effective tool. Look at how much bigger this thing is. The tongue is bigger than a person. That's mind-blowing, and it's a simple thing to add, especially because you can tell it just reuses the art, the one silhouette, and then it just literally copy-paste the art over there. But it's really effective. Having that size comparison is a really effective tool to have that I really enjoy having. The crazy one I want to really highlight is the Star Tyrant. For 2 reasons. One, I think the background is really interesting. It literally is a xenomorph when it comes to fucking breeding. It lays its eggs in living hosts, and then the eggs just burst out like a chest burster and devour the host, and it's fucking crazy. And that's a lot of the story seeds are basically an NPC or even a PC gets captured so that this thing can lay its egg inside that poor unsuspecting fool. Now, stat block wise, it's a CR7. It's got innate spells, including charming and dominating people and then teleporting them around, which is nuts. And it has 3 tentacle attacks at plus 8 to hit for 15 damage. That's pretty strong, but that's not the crazy part. The crazy part is, or you can attack with its energy drain, which is a plus 8 to hit, and it deals 6d10 plus 12 bludgeoning damage, plus 4d6 psychic damage, plus the Star Tyrant gains temporary hit points equal to half the damage, plus they have to make a DC 15 charisma saving throw or become paralyzed. What the fucking shit? How is this thing not taking over the entire planet? That's bananas. Holy crap, that seems really strong. I've been looking at it and going, okay, these guys seem pretty strong. And I looked at that and I was like, what? I didn't do a double take. That seems ridiculous. I should have looked up and seen what other CR7 creatures there are. If but I can't imagine anything can do nearly that much burst damage in one hit. I mean, that's gotta almost down players, especially on a good damage roll, and paralyze them, and it gains hit points. Boy, that is a hell of a creature right there. Neat looking too. Like all the creatures are very interesting looking. I'll say that. Like I think this style works very well for the fact that they're all very creepy, horror based, demons and fiends and like alien cross-dimensional entities. That looks really well, the black ink style I think fits it very well. If it were traditional high fantasy dragons and stuff, then I probably would be not as into it as I am here. But I think this does, like this little ropey thing. All those work really well. I do think the compendium relies a little bit too much on the hulking brute as a concept, and frankly, they are all the weakest, like the least interesting creatures here. There's this twist brute, there was the arboreal stalker, and then there was that devourer, the headless giant with the mouth neck. None of them are particularly interesting. They're just big fucking dudes with some big attacks, and I mean that's fine for a creature, but I just feel like there's a little too much of that here. I would have liked to see a bit more variety. I mean, again, there's only got 13 monsters, and 3 of them are very, very similar. I would have also liked to see a little bit more variety on the challenge rating, I guess. It's probably fine. I mean, I just feel like most people are going to be looking at that Tier 1 and Tier 2, and the fact that these are kind of about Tier 1 and Tier 2, but, leaning towards the later. In fact, they have, we got Monster by Challenge rating. So you can see here, most are between CR 6 and 10, which is solidly Tier 2. I just think you should know that before going into it, basically. So that's part of the review, is that you should know that most of these creatures are solidly Tier 2, and frankly, very, very powerful Tier 2. Like, these are your boss monsters, which I think is the tendency when you want to create a monster compendium. You want to make cool fucking monsters, and I get that. Like, I do. You want to make your monsters worth fighting, and you don't want to make a bunch of fodder, if that makes sense, and those aren't very interesting. But I think fodder's okay, especially if it's designed to fight with some of these creatures or be in their lair. Like, it would have been nice to have a stat block for, like, the Star Tyrant's, like, Chest Burster, like the little mini version. Like, that could have been interesting. Or there's even a mention of one of the backgrounds for the Devourer was, like, their whelps. Like, maybe just a little, especially, like, the young version of a monster. That can be an easy, like, bonus stat block to have. That would have been nice to see. Not something I'm going to take away from this in terms of a negative, but would have been a really nice bonus to have. But otherwise, that's what you get. I think it does its monsters well. I like the way it's organized. I like the way it's written, especially the descriptions, where it literally is like the DM. In fact, there's a lot of these situations where it's literally like asking these rhetorical questions. I'm trying to skim and find whenever it gives you the description. I know for the seed hook it definitely does. The protocol imp is a really funny one. That's all that it seems almost like a joke. One of the story seeds is somehow the party is in hell already and has ran afoul of the authorities. Did they do something relatively mundane, or did the cleric accidentally pray in public? Whatever the infraction, they now find themselves trapped within the judicial system of hell, and a protocol imp has been assigned to them as an attorney. That's great. I would watch that Netflix show. Protocol imp as an attorney. It's D&D in hell, and it's all just Law and Order lawyer base. That's fantastic. I think it's organized really well written. I like the seeds. I like the size comparison. I'm not super into the Ezine style in general, but I do think it works pretty well here. There's a little bit too much reliance on the hulking brute kind of archetype, and it just happens that those 3 are also just the least interesting monsters. But otherwise, I think this is very much worth your time. Let's go over my pros and cons. I pretty much just went over for Creature Feature Quarterly Volume 1 Pro. Monster information is well organized, including background, lore, and ecology. Visual size comparisons for a pro. I do love those. Give me those visual size comparisons. I want to see that in every monster thing now. Seems like a pretty easy addition. Each monster has several story seeds and hooks as fun examples to include the creature in your campaign. That is something I've literally never seen before. out of any creature compendium. I've never seen anybody do that, and that is brilliant. I also want to see that everywhere. Like, that's an amazing idea, just to include story hooks for your creatures. That's fantastic. And Pro, the black ink Ezine art style works well for the mostly alien and demonic creatures. I think it does fit well. I think they're well done in general, but I do think it fits the kind of theme here. Even though it doesn't really have a theme on the outset, you know, there's no introduction or anything of that nature, but after I learned, okay, the theme is very much these just monstrous fiends and alien-style creatures and monstrosities, then yes, it does fit. Cons, it mostly focuses on tier 2 creatures, some of which look insanely powerful. Again, if it's marketed as CR2 specifically, then that's fine. Or if it was some kind of like lead-in that it's missing that kind of organizational element at the beginning, like just a page or even a couple paragraphs. It's like, here are these creatures. Here's why we're including these particular creatures in here. Here's the general strength level. Just some kind of introduction rather than just jumping right into the stat blocks would have helped a lot for me to kind of understand what was going on here. And then con is the hulking brute. Several monsters are slightly different variations of the hulking brute concept, and none of them are particularly interesting. Especially, you know, once you've got one, the others aren't really doing it for me beyond that. Final verdict: a solid collection of creepy and otherworldly monsters await in Creature Feature Quarterly, Volume 1. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. You can follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.